Hi all, welcome to 2K21. We are a group of debut YA and middle grade authors. And so we are going to talk to you all about writing craft. We have a series of panels happening. This is the first and I'm going to let everyone go around and introduce themselves. I'll start. I'm JL. I'm the president of the 2K21 class. I'm also the author of Wings of Ebony, which is a YA fantasy about a Black teen from an inner city neighborhood who must protect her community from drugs, violence, and crime. And it came out January 26th with Simon and Schuster.
I'll go next. My name is Jessica S. Olson, and I wrote Soon Be Forgotten, which actually comes out on March 9th. So depending on when this posts, it could be before or after, but it's a Phantom of the Opera retelling, gender flipped fantasy Phantom of the Opera retelling. So that's who I am.
Great. I am Joan Smith, and my debut YA contemporary comes out April 6th. It is called the HALF-ORPHAN'S Handbook. I don't have ARCs because of COVID, but there's like a terrible, poorly lit cover version of it. It's a book that's, it's a YA contemporary that follows the story of a girl who goes to grief camp following the suicide of her father. And it is inspired somewhat loosely by my own experience of losing my dad.
And then we have our lovely moderator here as well, who is also a member of 2K21, but will be moderating today. So did you want to introduce yourself as well? And even your book, just if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, hello everyone, I'm Siran. I'm the moderator for this panel, so I will be asking the questions. And I am the author of Iron Widow. It's a Pacific Rim meets The Handmaid's Tale reimagining of Wu Zetian, the only female emperor in Chinese history. And it comes out September 21st, 2021 from Penguin Random House, and I don't have a cover or arcs yet. And I'm also the author of Zachary Yin and The Dragon Emperor. It's a MG. It's a middle grade series that's like Yu-Gi-Oh meets Chinese Percy Jackson, and that comes out from Simon and Schuster next year, like summer 2022.
Ooh, I didn't know that. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. So we're just going to be talking about writing craft. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to drop those questions in the comments and we'll cycle back through. Please share this video widely. We hope it's very useful and inspiring for aspiring writers. All right, should we jump in then? Sharon, you good?
Yeah, okay, so my first question for you all is what or who inspired the characters in your book?
So this character has always kind of been with me, but it took me to figure out where to set her for this story to actually come alive for me. And so to me, it always takes two elements kind of before I know I'm ready to write my story. I either need some kind of plot element, some kind of character, or a setting, two of the three, and then I can figure out the third leg of the stool, basically.
I can jump in. Wings of Ebony is inspired by my home and the community where I'm from. It's about an inner city teen, which is very much me and very much my teenage sisters, and just sort of putting my community on the page. The contemporary setting in the book is very much a character in the story. And so it was inspired by just the desire to see my community centered in fantasy novels and see poor inner city Black kids like myself, again, like my little sisters, given magic on the page and as the heroes of their own story. It's not something I've ever experienced reading, and I wanted it to exist. So now it does. So that's where it came from.
So for me, I grew up loving the Phantom of the Opera. I grew up listening to music and all that stuff, and I wanted to be Christine when I grew up. But when I finally saw the show on Broadway, it wasn't Christine that I really connected to. It was the Phantom, because growing up, I had, and I still do, but it's a lot less pervasive as it was when I was a child. But growing up, I had an eye condition. It was a really severe lazy eye, and I had to wear eye patches and stuff throughout school. And I was bullied a lot and treated pretty unkindly for the way that I looked. And so I really connected with the Phantom and how he was shunned and treated poorly because of the way his face looked. And so I wanted to explore the story from his point of view and like what kind of cruelty can drive a person to the ultimate breaking point. And that's kind of what I wanted to explore in my book. So that's what mine was inspired by.
So it seems that all your books come from a pretty personal place then. And so when you're writing, how do you add emotional depth to make imaginary people feel real?
I can start. So my book is written in first person present, which I think definitely helps with some of that because you get that experience of living in the character's shoes, like you're going through their emotions. And I think that there's just something about first person that allows you to really experience a character that I loved. And I thought that was really important for this story in particular because the narrative is so personal to Rue, my main character, and the stakes are so personal to Rue. I really wanted the emotion to come across. One of the ways that I do that, aside from writing in like first person, is I also try to paint a very clear picture of how Rue engages with the different aspects of her world. So it was important for me to pull the reader into sort of Rue's experience so that they can sort of suspend their own. So it's like when Rue is walking down the street and she passes a corner store or she passes, you know, a homeless person, the way that she responds to that person might be different from the reader's personal, you know, their personal perspective of what they think about and the things that go through their mind and the things that they do and say in that situation. So what I did in my world building is I just tried to really steep the reader in the authenticity of Rue's sort of life and her experience and the way she engages with even small things. There's a flashback, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's like a short flashback early in my book where you can see it's just a little memory of when Rue went into the little mini mart in her neighborhood and the exchange between her and the store owner who she'd grown up knowing, and like the store owner knows her mom, and like she goes to like take something and he's like, I'm gonna call your mom, like not the police, I'm gonna call your mom, and that's like scarier than calling the police. And so I wanted to show the reader who she is and sort of like redefine the way contemporary readers engage with sort of these regular things. Like, I don't know if we spend a lot of time thinking about Fig Newtons in a mini mart, but now every time you think of Fig Newtons in a mini mart, at least in Rue's story and in her head, you begin to learn a little bit more about who she is and how she sees the world in those really sort of tiny, tiny ways. And I think that once you experience someone's life and all of the little details, like collectively, as you progress through the story, your picture of like who she is and how she sees the world just becomes the reader's glasses in a way. And then in the moments where I really wanted the reader to feel her emotions heavily, just from a craft standpoint, I really dug into showing a lot in those scenes. So the show versus tell argument. So not a lot of tell in those scenes, lots of show, lots of describing how she physically is reacting to things, and really drawing those scenes out so that the reader can clue into them and go and sit up and say, you know, this is an important moment. So drawing attention to sort of the plot changes, but then also drawing attention to the keenly emotional moments and allowing the reader to really sit with grief and pain, through word choice, through pacing, through the way a scene is structured. The way, even just like the way that I show Rue is crying, the way that the crying feels versus just saying she's crying, because the hope is that the reader then experiences that a bit too. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I just want to kind of piggyback on that. So for my book, Isda, my main character, she experiences everything very musically because she's like very, very deeply entrenched in music, and that's how she kind of finds herself, is through her music. And so when I have, like, when she describes things, she talks about it musically, like she's very poetic, and she uses a lot of like music, like words like staccato or crescendo or, you know, pianissimo, like those kinds of things, just to describe her world and the way that she perceives it. And I think those little things that you can add in that make your character, like that show how your character is different from a regular person, like how your character perceives the world, how they describe the world, how they relate to the world around them. If you can make it distinct and memorable, that is going to go a long way to like making your character leap off the page. So that's kind of, I mean, that's a lot of what JL was saying about Rue, like making sure that like those aspects that are like your character that no other person does exactly like your character is going to make your character seem the most real.
Both of those are so good. The thing I think I would add here, I'm very in tune with like the physical sensation of what these emotions feel like. In my specific experience of writing my debut, a lot of it was trying to figure out how to filter this through the lens of trauma, because it was a big time trauma. And then also make it not so painful that it was painful to read. So there's a lot of moments of levity in my book as well. And I always want to make sure, one of my editors called it an emotional EKG. Shout out Wesley. She always was very cognizant of, if the scene before this one is really charged, then let's pull it down for the next scene. So finding that little balance of where your emotions are was really important for the full narrative thread. Another trick that I do, because I always tend to have characters feel something like in their chest or in their stomach, and that's pretty much it. So I always try to vary that up by thinking about senses. So like what JL was saying with these Fig Newtons, you know, what does something smell like in the room? And like, how is that now going to be tied to that memory for that person forever? And what does that feel like? So I ask questions like that, I think, too.
That's so smart. I love that.
All right, so the next question is something that comes up a lot in like revision notes. What do your characters want? What do they need?
So what's impossible with my story was that what my character wants is her dad back. In both of my character and me, both of our experiences, the initial experience was very unexpected, which makes things a lot more difficult, I think, in some ways, and in others not. So what Lila in my book wants is closure now, and she's really struggling to find that because she doesn't know why it happened. So that's kind of the big mystery for the book is why did this happen, and how can she find that kind of closure? And to figure out what my characters really want and need throughout, I know that for every single character in my books. I think that's really important. Even like a shopkeeper or like a bus driver, they have a story in my head. I always make sure that I know what they're afraid of. I think that that's kind of the key for a lot of people. And knowing what they're afraid of and knowing what they think is funny is a really good way for me to understand my characters.
To piggyback off of that, I was thinking about how a lot of times when you're writing a character, their want and their need are kind of opposites, or they're not the same. And so the character doesn't know what they need, they just know what they want. So like in my book, Isda, all she wants is to look like everybody else. She just wants to be like everybody else, and she wants to be able to, you know, live her life. But what she needs is to recognize that she is perfect the way that she is, and she is more powerful because of the way that she is. And so, but those things are opposites, right? And so like the purpose, like the true nature of like a really good character arc is when a character progresses from wanting what she wants to wanting what she needs at the end. And so I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think in Rue's story, very similarly, to put it in, I guess, like craft terms, because I assume, you know, a lot of writers are going to be watching this. It's really helpful to figure out what your character's internal arc is, but then also to figure out what the external arc is. The external arc is sort of like what the story seems like it's about. So Rue is trying to protect her sister. That's not a spoiler because you realize that from the first chapter, and that's been released on, like, there's a reveal of the first chapter on tor.com. So you think that the story is about her trying to protect her sister, but it's about so much more than that. So her external like goal is to protect her sister, but it's rubbing up against her internal goal. And I think that that's where you get that conflict and tension in your story. So one of the things that I see in the revision process a lot when I'm mentoring other writers is if there isn't enough, if your pacing is lagging or if the tension isn't there, you can dig into where are my internal and external arc? Like, are they grading against each other like they need to be? Are they moving too fast? Are they moving too slow? And making sure, kind of like Jess said, that it's sort of overarching. The midpoint is a nice place where to see a sort of natural shift there, or like a switch in direction, which can lead to the other, to chasing the right thing, perhaps chasing the right thing the wrong way, because you still need them to fail at a certain point before they can have that final victory at the end. But I think, yeah, internal and external arcs. And for anyone watching who is interested in more information on that, I highly suggest visiting goldenmayediting.com. the person who created that editing company is one of my CPs, and she's absolutely brilliant. She has tables and charts and a lot of free things you can download that can really help whip your story into shape if you're new to revising.
All right, and final question. How do you work with dialogue to make it feel both natural and integral to story development?
I can take this one because dialogue is my favorite thing to write. So it helps, and jury is still out if it's always this way. But for this book, Rue is so much of me and like my friends and like my aunties and cousins, like literally bringing authentic voice to the page for me. Voice is like my favorite thing in a book. Was a matter of just imagining I'm talking to those people or I'm hearing those people talk to me. And I think sometimes we can fall into the temptation of like making it sound like a character that we've heard before, whether it's on TV or in a book. But I think when we draw from personal experience, it just rings a little bit truer because it's filtered through our perception and our memory, which gives it that sort of like, fingerprint of like our lens on the story. So imagining that your character is talking to you, reading your work out loud, making it feel like an authentic conversation. The only caution there is making sure that your dialogue has purpose. Like not every conversation needs to be written at length. It's figuring out what pieces of the conversation are important. Like what do they show? What do they add to the story? How do they move the scene forward? And just making sure too, when there's dialogue, there should be tension. Like if they're just talking about, what they're going to do today, unless that's relevant to the plot or the arcs, or you're trying to demonstrate, like show something in their relationship, it's not going to hold the reader's attention. Like it has to be anchored by where it fits in the story.
I think another thing that can help with dialogue is remembering how real people talk. We don't usually say exactly what we mean. We usually talk around things. We keep secrets from each other. We sometimes like are sarcastic, or we like we're passive aggressive, like different things like this. And I think a lot of times, a lot of like first drafts or early writers will fall into the rut of just like having the character say like, I'm so mad at you, you're such a jerk. And like really, like in real life, people would be like, you always do that. Like stuff like that, where it's a lot more like nuanced and there's a lot more like just, we don't say what we think every time because we're trying, because we're associating with people and we react differently to the different people that we talk to. And so I agree with JL about, reading your work out loud, like the dialogue parts, because you can hear sometimes if it just sounds like it doesn't sound like a real thing that someone would say. And also another aspect of that is like trying to like streamline the dialogue so that you're not like talking around a subject until you get there, just like kind of condense it when you can. Obviously still having that nuance of like keeping people not saying what they actually mean every single time. But unless your character is like a super direct person, which that can be like a character trait. So it kind of depends on your character with that, but that would be my advice.
Totally. I also use dialogue a lot to reveal information that also could belong in a flashback, because I love flashbacks, but if I don't watch myself, I'll put them in every chapter. So I might use a dialogue, conversation to be like, oh yeah, remember the time we did this, or that kind of thing. That really helps me make sure that I do get to the point where instead I would go off. But something else I really like to do when I'm just really trying to find my footing is I will write an entire scene only in dialogue. So that is a major challenge to actually get something right. And like figuring out like, all right, where are they and how can I show where they are? So like, all right, hey, will you pass me that spatula? Like now you know that they're in the kitchen or something like that. And then at the very end of that, put it away for a few weeks, come back to it, see what it is actually happening in that scene. And if it's nothing, it needs to go away. And if it's something vital, like where can I build on that and where can I stretch and pull and that kind of thing. So that's one of my favorite exercises, especially if I know that something has to happen in a scene, but I don't know exactly what else I'm going to put in there or like what subplot thread to pull at that point. I'll write an entire scene just in dialogue.
I feel like I had one more thing, but I just totally lost it. The last thing, I was kind of going to jump on that a little bit and just say that one thing that you can do when you're writing dialogue is, shoot, I'm losing it. I'm so sorry. I like had this whole
Don't
idea.
worry about it.
Like, gone. Okay, I'll keep thinking. I don't know if anybody
It
else
happens all the time. I'll tell you that something I struggle with while you're trying to think of this is I tend to be like a fairly sarcastic person, and I'm like pretty goofy in person. And sometimes that doesn't translate well, and it doesn't come out the way that you think it does. So that's something that when I'm reading something out loud or when I hand stuff off to my CPs, they're like, I don't understand this joke. And I'm like, but why? It's so funny. And I realize that I need to go back and figure something out.
I remembered what it was, and I agree with that, but I remember what it was I was going to say. So the thing that I always get bogged down in when I'm writing is like, oh, this doesn't sound right. Oh, this doesn't sound good. It's like, that's what revision is for. Like, you can revise your dialogue so much. Like, that's the great thing about writing a book that you can't do in real life. Like, you can't like delete when you accidentally said something weird or that didn't make sense, or if you come up with like a better zinger, like, you know, you've had that before where you're like, oh man, I should have said that idiot at the store who knocked into me with his cart. But you don't think about it until 3 hours later. But luckily with our books, we can always go back and we can like add those things in. And then also kind of what you were saying, Joan, like getting feedback from other people, like sometimes other people can let you know if dialogue is sounding stilted. So.
Yeah, I think that's all really, really great. Was that the last question, Sharon? Well, did we want to go over? Thank you so much for moderating, by the way. Just taking time out of your schedule to be here to talk to us about writing. Do we want to take a minute and just say where we can be found online? Joan, you want to go first, then we'll go to
Yeah,
Joan.
sure. I'm everywhere pretty much at JF_Smith, SMIT, because Joan Smith is not a common enough name for anybody. So I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok now, and Pinterest as well.
I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Pinterest at Jessica Olson, OLSON, not an E, it's an O, 123. So you can find me any of those places with that handle.
Yay, I love that we're all on TikTok. And I am also on Twitter, Instagram. My dog is excited about this, if you heard that bark. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I have a Pinterest, but I only use it for my books, and I could not for the life of me tell you the name of it. So TikTok, on TikTok, it's just author JL. There's no dots or underscores, but on Instagram, it's author J.L. And on Twitter, it is author J_L, and L is ELLE. I also have a website, which is wingsofebony.com. Sharon, did you want to tell everyone where they can find you and your wonderful books that you have coming?
Oh yeah, I'm just Shiran J. Zhao everywhere, like everywhere. No one else has this name. So I'm on Twitter, Instagram. I have a TikTok, but right now I don't use it, but I plan on like using it more. And I'm on YouTube too. So like everywhere.
Well,
Great.
Thank you so much. We hope this was helpful. Again, if you have questions, please drop them down in the comments. We'll be checking those, and be sure to check back. There will be more writing craft panel questions. And if there's anything you're particularly wondering about that you want Class 2K21 to answer about writing, we'd be happy to. So again, drop those questions down below. You can also check out our website, which is, I should know this off the top of my head, class2k21.com. Is that right?
That sounds right.
I'm going to check it because
I think there might be a book.
Class
Is there books?
Class of 2K21. I forgot the of.
Okay.
Awesome.
Class of 2K21.com. And we'll make sure we put that in the notes of the video. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks, everybody.